Hello everyone, welcome to Astera Psych, and today I want to talk about one of the largest misconceptions that I see people make and have in the type community. And this is the idea that actions are cognitive functions, or that when we do certain specific behaviors, we are engaging in a certain cognitive function. And the way that Jung described functions, this is not how it works at all or in the slightest. We are not engaging in certain actions or functions when we do certain things. And I want to talk about why it's important to differentiate cognitive functions from the actions that we typically associate with them. Let's get into it. So people will come to me for coaching or typing sessions and they'll say something along the lines of, well, I've been trying to get better at my extroverted feelings. So I've been trying to be nice to people, or I've been trying to get along better with others, these types of things. And some of the time, these people won't even have extroverted feeling in their function stack. They're like an ENTJ or an ISTJ or something along those lines. And the issue is that when we look at things from the Jungian sense, those types, they don't have extroverted feeling. And I don't think that people really understand that extroverted feeling, or all of the cognitive functions in general, are not certain behaviors. They are the ways in which we process information. And the ways in which we process information can lead to likely behaviors or outcomes, but they are not the behaviors in and of themselves. So say, for example, someone who has extroverted feeling is going to process the social harmony information and these types of things from what they are seeing in the world around them. That's the information that is first and foremost being input into them. So therefore, they are more likely to act on that information because it's not only what is seen, but also what's valued to them. The action that comes from that is because they are seeing information in that certain way. Now, when you are a type, let's say you're like an ESTJ, for example, you can force yourself to kind of do those actions that you are seeing people who are high at extroverted feeling use, but that's just it. You're not processing information in the way an extroverted feeling type does. You're not actually taking in the information the way that they do. Instead, you're saying, I am seeing what they're doing because they're taking in that information, and now I can mimic it or try to get the same result that they have through my own ways of using my cognitive functions. Try to think of cognitive functions like this. So most people, as I mentioned earlier, they think of them like actions. So like if I punch someone in the face, I'm using extroverted sensing, right? Because, I'm engaging with the physical world. Well, that's not really what extroverted sensing is. The functions in and of themselves are more akin to lenses, like lenses and glasses. Imagine we have 8 different pairs of glasses, and each of these different pairs of glasses has a different color lens in it. So extroverted thinking could be blue, for example, while introverted thinking could be red. It doesn't really matter what the colors are. But what I'm saying here is that each of these different pairs of glasses is going to see the same thing or event in a different color because they are all different ways of taking in information. If you had all 8 cognitive functions lined up and looking at the exact same thing, it would be a different shade of the same thing. And therefore, the information that they receive from it is going to be different, which is going to influence the decisions that they make, which is going to lead to actions. So this is why the actions in and of themselves aren't the cognitive functions. If I go up and, as I mentioned earlier, if I punch someone in the face, this isn't extroverted sensing. That's not me engaging in that function. Extroverted sensing is a way of processing information. For example, extroverted sensing is the function that allows people to process the immediate sensory environment in a fluid and adaptable way. And this is why people who are high in extroverted sensing are able to react in the moment and do things like punch people in the face, for example, very easily because they are adaptable to their physical environment. When we engage in these types of behaviors, it doesn't mean we're using this specific cognitive function. It means that our functions are using their ways of processing to lead us to similar outcomes or results. One example I'd like to use to kind of differentiate how people think about functions as actions versus the ways of processing information is imagine that you have an ESFP boxer and then you have him up against an INTJ boxer. Both of them could theoretically be using extroverted sensing, for example, in the fight a little bit, but an INTJ is not naturally processing information the same way as an ESFP. The The ESFP is far more readily adaptable in the fight setting, for example, because they're adapting to what they're perceiving immediately, the objective stimulus that is coming into their lens. Now, the INTJ, on the other hand, is using their introverted intuition. They're more likely to be attempting to predict their opponent. They're going to be processing that same information, but ignoring the extroverted sensing aspect of it and attempting to process it through their lens of introverted intuition. How are they seeing this thing compared to the other person? And what action are they going to take as a result of that? Either one could theoretically win the fight, for example. It doesn't mean that the INTJ is going to be bad at fighting just because he has low extroverted sensing. It means that he's going to be using his information or his lens of processing information in a way to come to different conclusions than the ESFP, who is more likely going to use his lens to immediately react to the kind of sensory environment that he's interacting with. Let's go back to the idea of extroverted feeling versus extroverted thinking, because I'll see this one a lot in ENTJs or ESTJs who come to me and they're trying to be more like an ESFJ or an ENFJ. They're like, I really just kind of want to work on my extroverted feeling or get better at working with people, these types of things. And what I'll find is that they're not actually engaging or trying to engage in extroverted feeling. They're trying to get the result that extroverted feeling gets from doing its natural process. And you'll find that ENTJs or ESTJs will do this thing where they'll try to extroverted thinking the extroverted feeling. They'll essentially say, like, what can I do to find the best kind of logical outcome that's going to make everyone happy? Like, how can I logically make people happy or bring people together? And this isn't extroverted feeling. When you engage in this type of thinking, you're still using your cognitive function of extroverted thinking. You're just using it to attempt to solve a problem that is outside of your function's normal realm of what it usually kind of notices or tries to solve. And this is why I don't think people really understand a lot of how these functions work inherently. As I mentioned earlier, it's more like lenses, it's ways of processing information. Another good analogy is to think of it like a computer, where each function is a computer that has its own kind of style of output for the input that you put into it. If you put in the same piece of information into 8 different kind of programs or computers, you might find that the output is going to be very different a lot of the time, but sometimes these outputs can be very similar. And think back to what I said about extroverted sensing and punching people in the face. An extroverted thinking type or even an extroverted feeling type could certainly do the same thing, and that doesn't mean they're inherently engaging in extroverted sensing. It means that their way of processing information led them to the same result as an extroverted sensing type who might have come to that same conclusion. Another one of the ones that people really get mixed up on is introverted thinking, and even introverted feeling as well. People associate introverted thinking with logic in and of itself, when in reality, people with introverted thinking in their function stack approach information generally through a lens of step-by-step rational logic. It does not mean that when you engage in logical rationality that you're using introverted thinking. It means that people who have this function in their function stack normally process information in this way. There's no active effort required from them to attempt to process information in this way. The same goes for introverted feeling. If you're kind of developing morals for yourself or trying to follow some sort of moral code, it doesn't mean that you're engaging in introverted feeling. It means that you're trying to do what introverted feeling does. Introverted feeling types are going to be people who naturally process information in this way. Their lens, the lens that they are given and equipped with, is going to be processing information in a way that they don't actively have to put effort into things like thinking about their personal morals. But they're also going to struggle with the functions that they don't have because of this, because they don't have those lenses. And if they want to kind of get the results that other people have when they do these types of things or they process information in that type of way, they're going to have to put in more conscious and active effort because it's not their natural way of processing information. It's going to require more cognitive effort on them as individuals because that goes against how they naturally process information. One of the things Jung talks about in psychological types is the importance of not trying to be someone you're not. Like he uses the example of the INTP trying to force himself to use extroverted feeling because it's this repressed function and he has a freak out. This is kind of the same reason I think that people shouldn't attempt to try too much to use the functions that aren't naturally within their function stack. Because instead of being yourself and developing the natural skill set that you have in a way that's going to better benefit you, you're trying to be someone you aren't. You're trying to develop these skills that are not who you are naturally. Does this mean that an ENTJ, for example, shouldn't be aware of how their actions are impacting the social harmony of others? No, it just doesn't mean that they should try to be an extroverted feeling type. You can be aware of the outcomes of your ways of processing information without kind of attempting to be someone you're not. ENTJs can be very nice people, they can be very agreeable, but they don't do it through developing extroverted feeling. They do it through developing extroverted thinking alongside introverted feeling in a way that's going to make them not a jerk. They're not going to be someone who's extremely pushy, and they're going to have their own moral values, and people are going to appreciate them because of this. And then as a byproduct, the social harmony or the kind of group setting in and of itself is going to not be at conflict because they are a stable and healthy ENTJ. And this is why it's important just in general for people, I think, to try to work on the functions that they have instead of trying to work on ones that are outside of their function stack. Because if you don't have that function in your function stack, it's not who you naturally are. It's not your natural way of processing information. Instead, try to maybe be aware of the limitations that you have as an individual with your ways of processing information. What are the things that I'm not seeing through my cognitive functions, and what are the ways that I can use my natural gifts to attempt to ameliorate this or become a better person? All right, everybody, I hope you've enjoyed this discussion on cognitive functions as lenses and ways of processing information instead of as actions. This is one thing that I think people really need to understand if they want to step up their type and cognitive function understanding, because it's one of the easiest beginner mistakes people can make is to assume that actions are the functions in and of themselves. When cognitive functions, as I've mentioned many times in this video, are more akin to ways of processing information or lenses in which we see things. They're not going to be the actions that we take from the way that we process information. It's the way that we process information in and of itself. If you enjoyed this video, let me know down in the comment section below. Let me know what you think. Do you have any examples of maybe a time that you've thought about things like this incorrectly in the past, or maybe you disagree with what I'm saying here and you want to tell me why? Just let me know. Other than that, I would like to remind people that I do have personality typing sessions available at my website, asurapsych.com, if you're interested in working with me to find out what your personality type is and what that means for you. This has been Asura from Asura Psych. Have a good one.